Welcome to the Body, Mind, Spirit Show with me, your host, Coach Rita Hurry. Hey beautiful ladies, welcome to a new episode of the Body, Mind, Spirit Show. My special guest today is Kim Vopni, and I hope I've pronounced that right.
You have, thank you.
Great. And she is a vagina coach and the founder of Pelvic Wellness Incorporated. Is that pronounced correctly?
It is, thank you.
Great. Kim, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me. And good job on the pronunciation. That's 2 for 2. Not everybody gets, especially pelvian. Most people say pelvine or pelvini.
Brilliant. Because I know sort of like, because it's kind of like a Frenchy kind of term, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the French word for female pelvis.
Right. Okay. So tell us about what you do. I mean, I know you help many women globally find their Kegel mojo, and you build their awareness of their pelvic floor muscles. How did this whole mission begin for you?
Well, it started really, if I can reflect back all the way to grade 6, I saw, it was a sexual health, sex education class, and we saw a childbirth video, and I went home thinking there's no way in heck I'm going to do that. But I looked a little differently at my mom and said, well, she did it and she's still walking around and doing these things. But as I got older, I noticed she would start, she stopped running and she complained of back pain. And so I became more curious and asked questions. She was an OR nurse. She was very open with sharing, which I'm grateful for. And I asked her about birth, and she had episiotomies, and she had eventually had surgery for incontinence. And so I had this picture of childbirth that it was just not something I wanted to do, and that it kind of did a number on your body. And when I got married and did decide I wanted to start a family, I was determined to have a different story than my mom. And I had asked my midwives about what I could do to prevent tearing, prevent incontinence. And they said, there's this biofeedback device called the Epino that you could try. So it's a German company that makes it. And I purchased one and used it. I had a great experience. I certainly credit my midwives, and I was in a sideline birth position as well. But even they say that definitely played a role in my outcome. So I said, okay, well, I think more people should know about this, and could I become a distributor? So I contacted the company, and my intention wasn't for it to be a business. I just thought I would have a few that I would sell on the side. And I did that for a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then in 2009, I was laid off from my corporate job. And a few months before then, I had actually been considering starting, trying to make that a business so I could be home more with my kids. My husband's a pilot, so he's away a lot. We didn't have any family close by. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I could turn this into a business. And then lo and behold, I got laid off, and I thought, okay, well, it's forcing my hand, and here we go. And so I entered the entrepreneur world and started with that product. I grew a website, an e-commerce store for pelvic health products, basically, and started a second business with 2 other women, and did that, kind of juggling the two for a number of years. And the focus initially was on pregnant women, helping people prepare for birth and recover. And then as I started to move through different life stages myself, I recognized that perimenopause, menopause, beyond menopause, pelvic health still needs to be talked about. And that actually became a bigger passion in many ways. And it was initially I was called the fitness doula. That was sort of my brand, and it didn't necessarily resonate with the menopausal community. And several years ago, I was speaking at a conference for mompreneurs, and I got on stage, and up to that point, all people who had been speaking were all some sort of a business coach. And I joked when I came on that you now have a vagina coach for your business. And it just sort of, it was supposed to be a joke, but it was a bit of a light bulb moment. And I thought that captures more. It's the word that nobody likes to say, but it's the place that I want people to be focusing. And part of my mission is to get rid of the taboo. So let's just say the name and get it over with. So that's how it started.
Wow. And I think, you kind of hit the nail on the head there when you're actually saying that so many of us, including ourselves as women, it's like, no, you don't talk about that. It's like, even, I know that when I said to someone, oh, I'm going to have the Vagina Coach on my next show, and it was like, the Vagina Coach, it was like, what do you mean? Like, that just like is so out there. But even in today's world, it's still kind of, I mean, do you still get lots of like shocked looks and kind of like having to really explain yourself in terms of your business and why you do what you do?
I get a little bit, I would say definitely with the older generation. So my parents' age they're still not completely comfortable with that. Yeah. So definitely with that population. With the younger sort of my age group, a little bit. I get a little bit for sure. There are still some who aren't necessarily as comfortable. And then the younger generation, not really. They're kind of okay with saying and sharing everything. So yeah, so the tides are turning. It definitely has. I've had taboo roadblocks many, many times over the years, but it is becoming less and less. And so even just a friend of mine just shared, she interviewed her daughter who now works for her, and she works in the menopausal community. And she was asking her daughter about, do you feel empowered? And what do you think about the next generation? Her daughter's 18. And she said, I'm happy that I know this. And I want to know, I'm glad somebody has shared this with me. So I think that the whole purpose of all of us who have been sharing up to now, trying to break the stigma, the younger generation are listening and hearing, and they're now recognizing how important it is and grateful for somebody actually sharing.
Yeah. And I think it is important that the younger generation know how important it is to be aware of this for health purposes. So that's really good. Can you share with us a little bit about your own personal health journey in relation to this?
Yeah. So as I mentioned, when I started, my whole mission really in childbirth was to not tear and to not have incontinence. A word that I had never heard of before was pelvic organ prolapse. And at the time when I reflect back on my birth, my first son was, he crowned sideways. So there's a normal way that babies typically crown, and he came out sideways, which makes it a whole heck of a lot wider. I still had no external tearing, but I did have internal tearing, which I found out a bit later. And even much later, I found out that I actually had one of the muscles partially tear away from the bone.
Wow.
And so that's called levator ani avulsion. It definitely increases your risk of prolapse. So once I was starting to work in the world of pelvic health, I obviously knew now what a prolapse was. I had no symptoms about it to do with it. Yeah. And it wasn't until it's about 9-10 years ago now, where I first started to feel like something was a little bit off. And I had started seeing a pelvic floor physio at that point, which back when I gave birth, I didn't even know what pelvic floor physio was. And she said, yeah, you've got a tiny little bit of it's called a rectocele, which is when your rectum bulges into your vagina. Mm-hmm. And I felt like I was in a position to manage that. And I felt like I didn't freak out that much. I did a little bit, but not that much, because I knew lots of people. I knew lots of things. I knew what to do.
Yeah.
Unbeknownst to me at the time, I was also struggling with an autoimmune condition that I didn't know until years later. And one of the symptoms I was struggling with was constipation. And I couldn't figure out why I ate tons of fiber, drank water, moved my body, did all the things. Yeah. And I still struggled with constipation. And it has to do, I have an autoimmune thyroid condition, which slows things down. And I didn't know this at the time. So I kept trying to manage this constipation, but was still dealing with it. Yeah. And I know for sure that contributed to the rectocele worsening. And so anyway, eventually I found out that I had the autoimmune condition, made lots of changes. I'm in a much better place now, feel great. Constipation isn't, occasionally I'll have a bit of a flare and I can still struggle with it periodically. But so I've experienced prolapse. I had a stage 2 uterine prolapse at one point many years ago that I was able to reverse. I experienced the rectocele, as I've shared, and that I was not able to reverse. And it got to the point where the symptoms were starting to interfere with my quality of life. And I had tried all conservative methods to address and heal it. And I did end up choosing to have surgery this past December. And that has now, I was really afraid to share that part of my journey, because here I was talking about how to avoid surgery and how to keep your pelvic floor strong and do all these things. And then I was going to choose surgery. And I felt like am I being a hypocrite? Am I going to lose followers? But I gained a lot of the outpouring of people private messaging me saying, oh my gosh, I'm so happy you're doing this. You're giving me courage. You sharing your story has now made me feel not alone. There was another woman who works in fitness like me, pelvic floor fitness, who had it privately, secretly, did not tell anybody. And she messaged me and she said, you've given me the courage now to share. And so she started to share her journey with her community as well. So I didn't really expect that to happen, but it's been kind of a nice, I guess it made me realize that surgery has had a stigma around it and there's shame. And it's not something that I promote, but it is something that is an option and that needs to be considered and people need to be informed about. And so another new part of my mission is to increase awareness about all like that being one of the options that can help you. And because right now there's so little information about pelvic surgery and people are not in a position to make truly informed choices. So
yeah, I think that's what's beautiful about that is you're also showing that everyone has their own options in regard to their own personal journey. Like obviously you're teaching them something about their health, you're trying to help them with their pelvic health, but at the same time you've got your own personal journey. And I think them knowing that having this operation was the right path for you to take, if anyone's in that dilemma, they know that it's okay to choose that if that's what they feel they need to do. It's listening to what's right for you as an individual instead of feeling no, but I can't do this because I'm not supposed to, this is what I teach and whatever, but you actually listen to that inner voice within, which I think is powerful in itself.
Thank you.
So I know that many of us women overlook the pelvic floor. Why is it so important for us to be aware of it?
When you learn about the pelvic floor and you understand all of the jobs that it has, most people are amazed that it is not taught. It's the center of our body. It's the foundation of our core. It manages our continence. It helps with our pelvic and spinal control and stability. It contributes to our sexual response. Supports our organs. It contributes to a sump pump action to help move fluids and lymph through our body, like super important jobs. And we are not given any information at all in terms of the importance or how to care for it proactively. So I think if people understood all of the jobs and the importance of it, they would perhaps pay more attention. Maybe not, but at least they would be informed, and then that's their choice, right? But right now people just simply don't know that they have choices around it. It's just not even, they don't even know what questions to ask. They don't even know that it's a problem. They're kind of told through media that it's problems and challenges are just part of being a woman, or it's just part of getting older, or they may have been dismissed by healthcare providers, or maybe they're ashamed and embarrassed to talk about it. So it is fundamentally an incredibly important part of our body. And as women, so men do have pelvic floors as well, but as women, we menstruate, we have hormone fluctuations, we become pregnant, we have biomechanical, physiological changes that happen to our muscles and the alignment and everything. We give birth, which sometimes contribute to tissue injury. And all of that needs to be accounted for and needs to be understood and respected. And we're not small men. So we benefit from different movement practices. We benefit from paying attention to our cycle, and we benefit from not paying attention to what the media tells us and choosing to find people who will give us the right information about all of the different jobs that it does and how we should be caring for it.
Yeah, so important. Now, how would someone recognize, if you can share with us some of the symptoms that you know that there's a pelvic floor dysfunction happening? I know there must be various symptoms, but can you outline a few?
Yeah, so the most common is stress urinary incontinence. So that's where little bits of urine leak out with a laugh, cough, sneeze, jump, whatever throughout the day. And most people just put a pad and they think that that's just normal, and they put a pad on and they carry on. So that's the most common. Another one is urge incontinence or frequency, where people feel like they need to go to the bathroom all the time, or they get very strong urges and they feel like they can't make it to the bathroom in time. That could be another, again, life-changing kind of, they have to plan their day around their bladder type of situation.
Yeah.
So those are more the incontinence piece. You can have anal incontinence as well, where gas and stool can leak out. That's less common, but it's definitely life-altering as well. With prolapse, so pelvic organ prolapse is when the bladder, the uterus, and or the rectum shift out of their optimal position and either bulge into or descend into the vagina. So in the case of the bladder and the rectum, it can bulge into the front or the back wall of the vagina. And in the case of the uterus, it can descend from the top of the vagina down. And early stage prolapse can be asymptomatic. Nobody knows. And as it progresses, sometimes people may have back pain. They may have a feeling like something's in there in their vagina. They may have difficulty inserting a tampon or a menstrual cup, or maybe they feel their tampon or menstrual cup, or, usually we shouldn't feel them once they're put in correctly. They might notice that the tampon or the menstrual cup doesn't stay in, that it gets pushed out. They may notice pain or discomfort with sex. They may have difficulty starting the flow of urine, or they may find that it's hard to have a bowel movement. Maybe it doesn't completely empty. So those are all signs. Doesn't mean if you have those for sure you have a prolapse, but they're some of the indicators that could mean that you do. And my number one tip in terms of, if next question is, people say, well, how do I know? Like, I do have a couple of those symptoms. How do I know for sure?
Exactly, yeah.
See a pelvic floor physiotherapist. And I recommend seeing a pelvic floor physio over the medical providers. So not saying that we don't need the medical providers, we absolutely do. But in terms of a first line of defense, I believe pelvic floor physios are better equipped to point us in the right direction. They can screen for medical conditions, but not a lot of medical providers are referring on to physio. So while physios will refer back to medical if it's needed, not all medical people are referring to physio. And that is something that I really hope changes as we move forward in life.
Yeah, because it's not even, obviously I'm based here in the UK, and it's like when you're saying a pelvic floor physiotherapist, I'm like, I've never even heard of that here. I'm sure there is, but it's never been something that's openly talked about. It's like, okay, if you've got a back problem or you've had an accident, then you go and see a physiotherapist, but otherwise an actual pelvic floor physiotherapist never been spoken about. And
they do exist in the UK, and they exist around the world, really. And not very many people know. It's becoming a little bit more talked about now, but it is it's been around. Like, I know physios that have been doing this work for 20, 30 years, but it's really kind of in the last, say, 10-ish years, or even in the last 7, that it's really kind of exploded for good, which is, it's a good thing, but we still need more awareness. And it's something I think that if you're pregnant, I think the government should be paying for pelvic floor physio assessments for every single person.
Yeah, definitely. Because I'm thinking, when you were saying there about, some women, there are, and I know a few women who have problems putting in tampons or, menstrual cups as well. And they just think, well, I'm too small, or it's too tight. And yes, they have problems with sexual intercourse. And it's like, maybe it's just their way that their body's actually made, and they can't do anything, or, just get lubrication. That's the answer. But they could be, it's not necessarily, but they could be this symptom that they need to actually explore and see if that's a possibility as well then.
Yeah. And so people who have difficulty inserting a tampon because it's painful, or they have painful sex, then that could be tension in the muscles. It could be as simple as having somebody identify that and helping you learn how to relax the muscles. It could be like dyspareunia is very common. That's pain with sex. That's very common and very easily treatable from pelvic floor physio. But again, so many people just don't even know that that's an option. So, so my overriding mission is, if anything doesn't feel right, if anything hurts, and even if you have no symptoms, if you own a vagina, we should all be seeing a pelvic floor physio every year, just like we see the dentist proactively.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Well, I'll have to find out who my local one is. So can you, obviously we mentioned about the different stages that women go through in terms of, we mentioned obviously menopause and pregnancy and everything. Does the pelvic floor kind of change over these periods, and is there anything that we need to be aware of as women go through these changes?
Absolutely, it does. And so I mentioned we menstruate. So many people will notice that kind of the week before the first few days of their cycle, they may feel, they might have less sensation. It might feel a little uncomfortable. And what happens is we have, first of all, the uterus is a lot heavier, so the muscles are working harder. Yeah. But we also have a decline in estrogen, and that influences the walls of the vagina. And that's almost like a not precursor, but kind of like a glimpse into what then happens when we approach menopause. So menopause is one day. Menopause is the anniversary of 12 consecutive months without a period. The 6 to 10 years leading up to that is perimenopause. And then once you've moved the day after your menopause, you're postmenopause. The years leading up to it, there's all sorts of different fluctuations in our hormones that could contribute to an increase in things like incontinence. Vaginal dryness is another big one. And vaginal dryness is something that I think the statistic was about 80% of people. So we're all of us that have a vagina and a uterus, we're going to go through menopause. Well, maybe you've had your uterus taken out, but then you're definitely in menopause. But so we will all go through it. And over 80% of us will experience vaginal dryness. And vaginal dryness is not something that improves with time. So hot flashes typically go away. Sometimes the brain fog, those other symptoms may resolve on their own, whereas vaginal dryness typically gets worse. And when we no longer produce estrogen, the walls of the vagina, which love estrogen, we have a lot of estrogen receptors there, they start to narrow and dry out and thin. And people, maybe a bit of a funny term is a pleated skirt. So you can think of the vagina when we're younger as a pleated skirt. We have folds inside the walls of our vagina called rugae. Once we are approaching and hit menopause, without the circulating estrogen now, those folds start to straighten or flatten and the walls narrow. And some people, like a term that used to be used is vaginal atrophy. Now there's a bigger term called genitourinary syndrome of menopause, which it's a big word and it's supposed to encompass a lot of different pelvic health things, which I don't necessarily love grouping everything under one umbrella. I think we deserve to have a knowledge of each thing. Yeah. So vaginal dryness it can show up postpartum, but it can also show up in menopause as well. And that's something that, again, the bulk of us are going to experience. There's also just, so we talked about menstruation. There's the hormone fluctuations, which we talked about. And there's also biomechanical changes that may happen from maybe pregnancy, maybe birth, maybe activity that we do, maybe certain postures that we hold. So repetitive type activities can place certain loads on the pelvic floor. And the pelvic floor is a group of muscles that needs to manage tasks, just like all the other muscles in our body. Yeah. And when we don't understand how we access that group of muscles, I guess is the best way to say, when we're not necessarily told how to exercise it and how it works in coordination with our breath, then sometimes we may be doing things in a way that puts pressure down on those muscles that over time they're no longer able to manage very well. And that could be a contributor to prolapse or incontinence or what have you. So absolutely. And even just aging. I mean, as we age, we lose collagen and we have less elasticity, and that's just something that is a part of aging. But diet and exercise and physio are all things that can help us increase the kind of the health span of our pelvis.
Yeah. So elaborating on from that, in terms of diet and exercise, are there any particular kind of like do's and don'ts that you can think of offhand, just as like tips that probably some of the listeners can actually take away with them?
Yeah. A big one I would say is stay hydrated. So when people experience pelvic floor challenges, especially incontinence or frequency or urgency, they will restrict their fluids and they'll think, well, if I'm not drinking anything, then I won't have to go. But that concentrates the urine, and the bladder doesn't like concentrated urine, so it will signal you even more. So staying consistently hydrated, aiming for between 3 and 4 liters of water per day, which to some people sounds like an enormous amount. But the more hydrated you are, the less you will pee. Initially, it's kind of like when you pour water on a really dry plant, you know how it just kind of runs, it doesn't actually get absorbed. And so that can sometimes happen when people increase their fluids at the beginning. But as you become more consistently hydrated, that won't happen so much anymore. So up your water intake. The other thing that helps with is making sure that we have good bowel movements. So constipation is a huge, it's very detrimental to the pelvic floor. So we want to avoid constipation, and water intake plays a role. Fiber intake plays a role. Mm-hmm. Usually the general recommendation is 35 grams of fiber. I've been speaking with more people lately, and the recommendation that they're saying is closer to 50, even up to 100 grams. Now, you're not going to just double up your fiber in one day. It's something, again, you want to gradually increase. But a good tip that was shared with me is to increase the diversity of the types of plant-based foods that you have, and aiming for about 60 in a week. And I actually just last week tracked, and I thought, how close am I to 60? Did I have to really try to get 60? But it's actually, when you write things down as you eat them, you realize you do eat a fair number of plants, but you may also realize that, oh, I actually only have 25 types that I typically eat all the time. Yeah. So increasing the diversity can help with our gut microbiome, and that can help with elimination as well. So as long as we're eliminating better, that can help manage our hormones, but it can also help ensure that we're not going to put any downward pressure on the pelvic floor. The other thing that I would say is, many people, again, who might be experiencing incontinence or afraid that they're not going to be able to make it to a bathroom in time, they may be peeing just in case, or going to the bathroom when they don't necessarily feel the urge. And this can train the bladder to signal more often. So sometimes people who are going, say, I feel like I go to the bathroom all the time. Sometimes it's been their habits that have helped condition the bladder to signal more frequently. And so don't pee just in case, and make sure you're not telling your kids to go pee just in case. Let them tell you when they need to go. I have a YouTube video about how to stop or how to fix overactive bladder. And it talks about a couple of steps to take back control, so that you're not allowing your bladder to signal you that frequently. And again, I say this ad nauseum, every call, every podcast I'm on, is find a pelvic floor physio. If there's one thing you do, see a pelvic floor physio. It will change your life.
Wow, great tips there. I'm just thinking in terms of, obviously, this show is the body, mind, spirit show. In terms of what you just said about, obviously, don't go and urinate just because you feel, okay, I have to, or, just to make sure. What would you say in terms of like mindset in that? Because obviously that comes to play in there as well, about training your mind to not only recognize the symptoms, but also that mind control of, you don't need to use the toilet, but you're going just in case. I mean, would you say that's part of what you do in terms of coaching? Like, you've noticed people's mindset that you have to work on?
Yeah, exactly. And that's a huge piece that I cover in the video, where I talk to people and tell them to talk to their bladder. So first of all, it's identifying and acknowledging that you've maybe contributed to this, and you did the best you knew with the information you had at the time, and now you know different, and now you're in a position to make change. And so it's just a matter of creating the awareness, and then talking to your body, acknowledging and taking back control. And also the other, with regards to mindset too, the other piece of it is also, people are ashamed with pelvic floor dysfunction. People feel resentful. People feel alone. They feel they're desperate to feel normal again. and they're often avoiding sex or they're avoiding social outings. And so a big piece of it is like moving forward and finding the things that bring joy, finding the things that you are comfortable doing, finding the things that you have confidence in doing, along with all the other kind of lifestyle tips that work in there. But the mindset is a huge piece as well, because it really, especially with prolapse, that's the piece that the physical symptoms are, they kind of come and go and they're a pain in the butt, but it's the mental side that I find the biggest struggle.
Yeah, definitely. Just one last question in terms of obviously exercises. Is there a particular exercise or workout regime like yoga or Pilates or something like that, or any kind of core work that's women should maybe possibly be incorporating into their workouts more so to be able to strengthen their pelvic floor?
There's lots of different types of exercise, and I always say do what brings you joy. So that's, if whatever it is, there's no good or bad exercise really. It's if you love it and you do it joyfully, then that's serving a lot. I do encourage variety of movement. So if you do love one thing, see if there's something else that you may love that could help complement that. Yes, there are certain poses in yoga that could potentially be considered pelvic floor strengthening. Same with Pilates, same with hiking, all sorts of things. But at the end of the day, it's not about a specific exercise. It's about the execution of the exercise and the person doing it. And when we back up and kind of peel back the layers to getting to the core, getting to the root, which includes the pelvic floor, that's the foundation of the core. When people understand and appreciate and can connect with that part of the body and coordinate it with their breath, they're basically, that's what a Kegel is. So again, I also on my YouTube channel, I have a whole Kegel playlist. Right. Kegels are a very prescribed exercise, but no one really is ever taught how to do them correctly. Yeah. So the Kegel exercise is beneficial when done correctly, when it's done consistently. It's not a quick fix. And then the way that I approach it is to bring that into movement. So bring it into your Pilates class, bring it into your yoga class, bring it into your resistance training. When you understand how to connect with that, with your true inner core, and train it dynamically as part of your workout routine, many people can actually lift heavier. Many people notice that things like back pain that was preventing them from doing certain exercises goes away. And that's like, you can turn a bicep curl into a core exercise if you recruit your pelvic floor through it. Yeah. So I think do whatever you love to do, move in varied ways, but learn how to connect with your pelvic floor and bring that into movement. So that's what I have, a 28-day challenge called the Buff Muff Challenge. And it's a pelvic floor, it's a whole body fitness workout that you do each day for 10 minutes. But the emphasis is on connecting with the pelvic floor and adding it into those movements. And it transforms people's lives. It's like, like I said, everything becomes a core exercise when you can do that.
That sounds amazing. I'll definitely be checking that out for sure. Kim, I could talk to you for ages about this. There's so much there. And I mean, I've learned a lot, and I'm sure my listeners have learned a lot. Where can our listeners go to find out more about your service and more information?
My website is vaginacoach.com, and my social handles basically are all Vagina Coach or a version. So if you go to Google and put in Vagina Coach, you'll probably find me. YouTube, Instagram, that's usually where I spend the most time. I also do have a private Facebook group called Box Talk. And that's a space where women can come and learn, but also share and hear from others and feel supported in their journey and understand that they're not alone. So it's really a space where I share my knowledge and experience, but people are also in there sharing their own knowledge and experience. And it's a place to come and learn and feel supported with regards to your pelvic health.
And I think that's so important as well, because to know that you're not the only one that's going through this, and to
right.
gain that support, like you mentioned earlier, in terms of you choosing, to go for an operation for your own personal journey, and others gaining from hearing about your journey as well. I think community support, so that's great. Kim, thank you so much. It's been so informative, and thanks again for being my special guest.
You're welcome. I appreciate the opportunity to share. Thank you.
Thank you. So listeners, that's it for today. Thank you for listening, and see you next time. Bye. I hope you enjoyed the show. Stay tuned for more tips, motivation, and of course inspiration coming up real soon. If you want to email me and send me messages of what you thought of the show or anything you'd love me to cover on the show, please email me at coachRita@swasthialiving.com. Swasthia Living is SwasthiaLiving.com. See you real soon. Bye.